his friend went to light the lamp, and as soon as he struck the flint, there was a huge flash and a bang, and the mine shaft caved in. Maybe everyone died in that one moment, or maybe some people died slowly. Whatever happened, all of the miners were killed that day. After that, the mine was closed forever, and the bodies were never recovered.
niemand als moeder. Je kom in los.
100 years later, and row upon row of houses were built on the land above the old mine. Nobody knew where the mine was, as nobody ever kept records. The houses were brand new and spacious, and the people who lived in them had never known such luxury. The years went by, and people came and went, and the houses grew more and more decrepit, until at last they were sold privately. Eventually, a young couple bought a house and moved into it with their 2 young children, a boy aged 4 and a girl aged 7. They lived in the house very happily for a little while, but then they started to notice strange things happening in the house that were a little bit frightening. The lights in the house would flash on and off. The TV would suddenly change channels when nobody was holding the control, and the volume would go up and down by itself. There were strange noises in the night, and things would turn up accidentally broken when there was no explanation. The young couple were worried about all of this, and they asked around and found that it was the same for all the people who had been living in the house over the last 50 years, and that they had just gotten used to these strange happenings. The couple decided that they needed to do some work on the house to stop it from falling down. One job that really needed doing was a new floor putting into the living room. For countless years, a terrible draft had blown up through the floor, and it didn't matter what people did, the draft could not be stopped. The builders came and began to lift the old floorboards, and when they did, they were totally shocked to find a shaft disappearing down into the darkness. There was no mistake. This shaft was an old mine, and it could be hundreds of feet deep. The workmen left the building as quickly as possible, as they felt that they were in great danger. Inspectors came to see whether the house would fall down or not, and they decided that it wouldn't, and the family could stay in the house as long as they never went into the living room. A big lock was put on the door, whilst everyone tried to work out how they would fix the problem and who would pay for it. It had at least explained the draft. One night, as the children were trying to sleep, they heard some strange whispering noises coming from the cupboard. And when they went and opened the door, they found a group of strange-looking people huddled in the corner. The people were a funny-looking colour, and the children realised that they could see straight through them, and they seemed to be wafting like leaves in a gentle wind. The people looked very old and wore strange clothes, and they had funny haircuts. They seemed to be trying to talk to the children, who thought if they listened very carefully, they could almost hear what was being said. The children stayed at the cupboard and listened until at last the people just seemed to fade away. Each night the funny people in the cupboard came back and the children listened to what they had to say until they faded away, or until at last the children got so tired that they went to bed and fell asleep. One day the children's dad was talking to their mum at the table and asked her what she thought was at the bottom of the shaft. When the children started to talk about the people from the cupboard being at the bottom of the shaft, the parents asked them which people. They said the funny white people in the cupboard. The parents were very worried about this, and they asked them to show them. They all went upstairs and looked in the cupboard, and although the children could see the funny people who were trying to smile and talk to them, the parents could not, and they didn't believe them. At last, they asked the children if the funny people had names, and the children, who now knew the funny people by name, told them that they had. first, the parents put all of this down to an act of imagination. But then, one day they were watching the TV when a programme came on about a mining disaster that had happened 200 years ago. And all this, as this was the 200th anniversary, some kind of memorial was going to happen later that week. The father was quite interested in this and decided that he would try and find out more. He went to the library and they told him to go to the Institute of Mining Library in the town, where he would probably get better answers. Well, to cut a long story short, he found out about the accident that had happened that day, and that the names of the miners who were killed was the same as the names the children had given him. He was amazed. Not only did they know the names of all the miners, but they also knew the nicknames that most of them had. The children had said that the funny people had been complaining that it was cold and dark where they were, and that they were very unhappy because they couldn't go to the other place, which he hadn't understood at the time. He knew now what they meant, and that when they had said that they wanted to be moved to a warmer ground, he knew then that the bodies needed to be buried in a proper church ground. The young couple told the authorities about this, and at first nothing happened. But when the newspapers got to hear about it, action was taken. Some people were brought in who went down into the shaft to retrieve the bodies and bring them up to the surface. After this, they were buried, and on the day that they were buried, the children saw the men waving goodbye to them, and that was the last they ever saw of them. The builders came and put a huge plug of steel and concrete into the hole to make it safe forevermore. A brand new floor was put down, and the people moved back into their living room. Well, what with the new windows and the new floor, they never felt a draft in that room again. And as far as I know, they lived happily forevermore.